When you think of Jeep, you probably imagine tough American 4x4s crawling over rocks and plugging through mud. But the new Jeep Avenger is a little bit different. For one thing, it's fully electric. In fact, it's the first model in the brand's 80-year history to be powered solely by batteries. It isn't a 4x4 because drive only goes to these front wheels. And forget America, this car won't even be sold there. Jeep is now part of the Stellantis group, which also owns Citroën and Peugeot, which explains why none of this chunky bodywork here are the same basic underpinnings you'll find in a Peugeot E2008. In this review, I'll be finding out if this completely different approach makes this the best Jeep ever for people who plan to drive on this stuff, or if losing the stuff that makes a Jeep, well, a Jeep, makes it a bit pointless. Stay watching for the answers, and for a great discount on your next new car, head over to whatcar.com. So the first thing that strikes you when you see the Avenger in the metal for the first time is just how small it is. This might be based on an E2008, but it's actually about 20 centimeters shorter. So in terms of its footprint, this is basically the same size as a VW Polo. It is taller than that car, of course, so we would class it as a small SUV, particularly because of the way it looks. So it's got the traditional Jeep 7-slot grille, and on the sides here, you'll see squared off black plastic wheel arches around the back. There are also X's in the taillights like there are in the larger but not very good Jeep Renegade. And it has quite a lot more ground clearance than a regular small hatchback as well, about the same as an Audi Q5. That's not bad at all for a car of this size. And to make the car look even taller than it really is, Jeep has come up with some clever styling tricks. So it's got this black plastic cladding all the way around the lower section, and the daytime running lights as well, they're on top of the headlights up here. You'll notice this particular car has decals on the bonnet and along the sides. They will be offered in the UK, but at the moment Jeep hasn't decided how much it will be charging and which trim levels they'll be available on. Another thing this doesn't share with the E2008 and the Mokka-e for that matter, which is another car built on the same eCMP platform, is its electric motor and battery. Now that is because those cars are due an update, so they will all eventually have the same electric drivetrain. But the Avenger is the first to get a new, more powerful and more efficient electric motor and a larger 51 kilowatt hour battery. A bigger battery of course means a longer range between charges. This can officially do up to 249 miles on a charge. That's not bad at all, although it is worth pointing out that both the Kia Niro EV and the MG ZS EV long range can go a bit further, and the MG is slightly cheaper as well. Charging, well, it's pretty good for a small electric SUV in this price bracket actually. This can pull up to 100 kilowatts, which means you can go from 10 to 80% in around 25 minutes. That's a bit quicker than those rivals from Kia and MG I just mentioned. And if you plug in at home using a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, then you'll be waiting just over 8 hours for a full charge. Now, if you're thinking this is a small car, so it's bound to be completely impractical for family life, then you will be pleasantly surprised by the boot. There is 355 litres of space in here, not as much as in a Niro or a ZS, but quite a lot more than there is in a Ford Fiesta, for example. And because of this square opening here, it should be pretty easy to load in bulky items. Something a little bit bigger than this suitcase here, which, believe it or not, has not been colour coordinated by Jeep. This is actually my cameraman's case, just happens to be exactly the same colour as the car. There is also a height adjustable boot floor and some further storage under the floor, which is just about enough for the charging cables. And you can, of course, fold down the rear seats if you don't need to carry anyone in the back. And to be honest, you may as well do that if the people you want to put in the back are tall, because as you can see, legroom is pretty poor. I am just over 6 foot and this seat in front is set up for my driving position, so it will be better if there is a shorter driver in the front or kids or shorter adults in the back, but clearly not the most practical family car in the world. Headroom though is pretty good, and you get a good view out thanks to this quite big side window here. Getting in and out though is a bit more tricky because you've got a big sill at the side here and quite a narrow opening, so you've got to contort yourself a little bit to get in and out gracefully. Much better news in the front here though. Let's start with the driving position because it is way better than the one in a Peugeot E2008. In that car, you have Peugeot's iCockpit arrangement, which means you have a tiny steering wheel and you're supposed to look over the top of that to see the digital instruments behind. Now that's fine if you're tall. I personally didn't have a problem seeing the panel, but if you're shorter or you just like to have the steering wheel a bit higher up, then there's a good chance you won't be able to see how fast you're going. And generally it just feels a bit unnatural as well. This is much more conventional. You view the instruments through the steering wheel and it will just work for more people. The seats are also comfortable as well, although it's a bit of a shame that you don't get adjustable lumbar support on any version and you can't add it as an option either. The interior is pretty smart as well, by class standards at least. You get this enormous gold bar that stretches right across the face of the dashboard to brighten things up. And there are part cloth, part vinyl seats on the Summit version that we're driving here. This particular car actually has leather, that's a £900 option. So although there are lots of hard plastics in here, it looks upmarket, it doesn't feel cheap, and that is the important thing. It is worth bearing in mind, however, that if you go for mid-level altitude, then this gold section here is replaced by silver trim, and on the entry-level longitude, that gets a sort of weird grey textured surface. We haven't actually sat in that car, but it does look a bit drab in the pictures, so that is worth bearing in mind. All trim levels do, however, get this 10.25-inch touchscreen infotainment system. It's nice and high on the top of the dashboard, not down here like it is in an MG ZS, so it's easy to see without looking too far away from the road while you're driving. And in most respects, it's pretty easy to use as well. You've got nice big tiles and easy to hit icons, and it also responds pretty quickly to presses, which isn't the case in the E2008, so that is impressive. And you've also got a shortcut to the home screen, so if you get lost in a sub-menu somewhere, you can quickly get back to the main screen. You do have to pay extra for a built-in sat-nav if you go for the cheaper trim levels, but to be honest, we wouldn't bother because all versions get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, so you can just tether up your phone and use Google Maps or Waze, which, let's be honest, 99% of the time you're probably going to do that anyway. Storage space also very, very impressive. You've got this enormous cubby here hidden between this magnetic lid. There is another big storage area down here with a cup holder in it, and further back under the central armrest, another big hole to pop things out of sight as well. You've also got a huge storage tray across the centre of the dashboard here with a removable bottom to it, presumably so you can wash it. There are also decent sized door pockets, and you even get a reasonable size glove box. Right, I think it's about time we went for a drive, but just before we do that, I'm going to reset the trip computer so we can get an idea of the real world efficiency of this car and therefore the range. Well, the first thing to point out, this car is very easy to drive. The controls are very light. The accelerator response is quite predictable. The brakes as well, in some EVs, they can be quite grabby and makes it difficult to slow down smoothly, but not the case here at all. So in urban environments, this car is very well suited. We are not really in an urban environment now. We are going up quite a windy mountain road, and you do notice that the suspension's quite soft, so there's a fair amount of body roll. This is a small SUV. That is the case in most rivals like the Nero and the MG. So this isn't remotely sporty to drive. There is a sport mode, and if you press that, then you can put some more weight into the steering, and it also makes the accelerator response sharper, but really, I'd stay away from that. It doesn't really suit the car's character at all. Performance is nothing special, particularly by EV standards, but acceleration's smooth, it's strong enough. You actually have to break through the two-stage accelerator pedal right to the bottom to get maximum acceleration unless you're in sport mode. But even if you don't do that, you'll get up to speed perfectly quickly, particularly around town, which is really where this car is best suited. The only thing I would say is because the suspension is quite soft, there's a lot of vertical movement in the car. We've only hit a couple of sections of road that's really highlighted that out here, but in the UK, there is a lot more of that kind of undulating road that you get on a typical B road, for example, and I can imagine this car getting a bit out of shape along one of those. But as I say, around town, this is going to be very easy to drive and quite a pleasant companion overall. It's pretty quiet as well. There isn't much road noise. Again, the very smooth surfaces certainly helps. And we were on the motorway a little bit earlier on, wind noise not too bad either. And also you don't have much in the way of motor whine. So by class standards, this is pretty impressive. So efficiency. Well, apparently we have been doing, according to the car at least, 16.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now that translates to around about 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour. So pretty good, especially when you consider that the route we've been on has been relatively hilly. It's certainly not a nice long flat piece of tarmac where you can maintain a speed. And also it's 16 degrees at the moment, so not that warm, relatively mild. So on the whole, I'd say that's pretty impressive. 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour translates to a theoretical maximum range of 194 miles, but expect to get further than that on a flatter route, particularly if you're driving gently. And that brings me on to two cool things and two annoying things about this car. This grey plastic cladding on the bumpers doesn't just make the car look a bit more rugged, it also serves another purpose. Because it protrudes slightly, it means if you reverse into something, you're more likely to scratch this than the paintwork, and that should work out, Jeep says, quite a bit cheaper. The indicator doubles as a drum machine, which is amusing for about 10 seconds, but gets very annoying very quickly. See what I mean? A couple of quirky things on this car that might help keep your kids amused are a ladybird on the roof here and a picture of a small child looking through a telescope on the windscreen. There is a start button, which you could argue is unnecessary in an electric car. But anyway, if you put your foot on the brake and you press it, nothing happens until you hold it down before the car eventually fires into life. Prices start at just under £35,000, and even if you go for the cheapest version called the Longitude, you get quite a lot of standard equipment, including 16-inch alloys, automatic climate control, rear parking sensors and keyless entry. You also get a heat pump as standard for more efficient warming of the interior in cold weather. That's something you'll have to pay £900 for on a Nero EV. And unlike with the Nero EV, you can add quite a few optional extras to the Avenger, so you don't necessarily need to jump up to the next trim level if you just want to add bigger alloys, for example. There are, however, two more trim levels, as we mentioned earlier, and as well as a more upmarket interior, Altitude also gets you 17-inch alloys and a powered tailgate, while this range-topping Summit, that gets 18-inch wheels and some extra assisted driving tech. Despite its unfriendly name then, the new Avenger is a really likeable car, and we reckon it will give its main rivals a tough time when it takes them on in one of our group tests later in the spring. But for lots more information about the Jeep Avenger, just head over to our website whatcar.com and read our detailed 4-point review. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, we'd really appreciate it if you give it a like and hit subscribe so you can watch lots more videos like this. We'll see you next time.